Hi there everybody, my name is Kate and welcome to my channel, Trinergy Awakens Naturally. So I want to talk to you about the fact that the world is waking up. We're in a pretty tumultuous time. It's March of 2026, however, truth is timeless. It just so happens to be the truth, and right now in March of 2026 is pretty harsh. And we're being faced with the opportunity to either kind of wake up and get with it or continue to oscillate over there and be abysmally lost, in the desert, so to speak, wandering around, or actively playing the game of putting people into the desert. We're either over there doing things that way, or we're struggling over here to wake up and figure out, this is what I can do to make things better, and this is how I can move forward by not doing that anymore. There is a process for how we get to that state of being, of at least answering those questions, or asking those questions before we can even begin to answer them. And you don't begin to ask questions until there's a level of discomfort enough that I need to be this bothered, this frightened, this angry, this triggered, this activated within me, 111, that I'm even going to question what's happening here. There are so many people that have been in operational mode of NPC or soulless, or just kind of moving in that drone mode, because that's just where they are, or where they were. And as we wake up, people that are kind of more in the know of what's happening here, we can see this. But as we're watching this, the biggest thing is people are waking up or coming to realize, oh my goodness, if they're hardcore over there and in the matrix and not interested in leaving, I'm not talking about that. They're dedicated to their cause. Cool. You're playing the opposition. You're playing the adversarial role here. Cool. You're very well defined. I'm talking about those people that are kind of in the middle. That are possibly wobbling around and going, oh dear, because fear is a huge motivator. That's what motivates most people, is we don't want to be separated from whatever it is that this thing is possibly asking me to separate from, which it's already asking me to separate from my sense of peace and well-being and safety. Then, how is it doing that? Why is it doing it? And how much do I have an effective way to actually alter that trajectory? What can I do? And that's kind of tough, because we need the courage to be able to stand up in the midst of all of that and actually look at what we're seeing and have that strength and that endurance and the courage to do that. The difference now, though, is that as people are coming in and waking up and understanding, there's a great deal of backlash with, oh my God, I can't believe that I did this, or I can't believe that I did that. How could I have been so stupid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as people are coming into their awareness. What I want to put out there, though, is that forget not that the powers that used to be, that structure of the old, all that whole system, the age of Pisces, the control, all of these places where we were overly managing one another, those are systems we built the entire society that we live on the globe. That's a global thing, that we've built these societies and these systems of how we do things, and they're changing because Earth is changing, the consciousness is changing, we're waking up, however you're perceiving that. We are actively going through big changes in consciousness, period, for whatever reason they're happening, whatever their sourcing is, and whatever the story is that's associated with it, because it's different depending on who you talk to. Doesn't matter to me, because I'm more about how can I get in here and start fixing this problem, and fixing the problem without knowing that the side that's playing, pretty brutal and brutal battle, those are folks that they're not experiencing the fear in the same way, because they've moved with impunity. Some of these energy patterns have been in play for so long that there is no other identity except this particular dark action. This is what we do, and they're in a bandwidth of just karmic stuff that's dark and ugly. And so fear is not what's motivating that. Greed, lust, sloth, all that, whatever. Those are definitely motivating. However, it's not fear that's the motivator. The installer of fear doesn't have anything to fear, because they're bringing the game of fear. However, the difference now is that all the old ploys for that fear to be installed, your direction, my direction, etc., the more that the other side of that equation looks at it and says, yeah, that's some crazy stuff that you're saying right there, and no, whatever that is, that's gaslighting and it's BS, and I'm not interested, thank you, no. If it turns into a battle, you've just enacted over there. So I'm not talking about actively fighting back with somebody or getting into a row, because that's the same karmic energy. I'm talking about just somebody waking up and saying, yeah, I know of those tactics used to work on me, as a person, as a society, as a community, as, you know, a job designation, as a gender. I mean, that stuff used to work. However, they don't work anymore, and I'm not interested. I'm just going to dip out and never see you again. Bye-bye. And off I go. The other side, the opposite side that's used to installing fear, their fear is, this is the first time they're having to come up against, wait a minute, the fear and the feelings and the triggers and the reactions and stuff are born out of that, wait a minute, there's something different here, that all my old ploys aren't working. They don't experience fear the same way that somebody who's being brutalized on the, you know, at the bottom of the heavy hand, they're squished underneath someone's foot. They're not experiencing it from that side. They don't understand fear in the same way because they've been using fear as their motivator and as their tool. Unfortunately, though, without fully understanding what it is to install that level of hysteria, panic, anxiety, trauma, you know, anguish, fear, anxiety of epic proportion, in order for you to understand why that's bad and how that's not good, that's a bad thing to do, we're gonna have to, you know, do things that really put this back on your plate. And so when you see major moves being made and it looks like, you know, what the hell is that? This person is great power and they seem like they knew what they were doing. Quick, janky movements are belying the truth, which is that there's people are starting to wake up and find the opposition on the other side going, yeah, no, I'm not really about this, and see you later. I'm not interested in playing the Hunger Games with you. I see that you're in the Hunger Games, and doop, I'm out. I'm not gonna have to do this because I don't want to. I don't have to. And everywhere that we can dip out of those conversations and dip out of those lifestyle choices and dip out of those places and those karmic bonds with people and institutions, etc., the more that it will cause the other side to really dip into their weird bag of how they're going to cope with that. So you have people waking up perhaps to, they're going to wake up on the dark side, experiencing fear or anxiety or emotion or some sort of dysregulation that they're just absolutely not used to. Now, people like to talk about NPCs and soulless, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Part of the reason, in my personal humble opinion, part of the reason that people don't experience fear, you know, when they're in those positions, and part of the reason that it's happening now is to bring the balance that's necessary, that they're going to wake up the way that they wake up, but they're primarily working out of dark. It's not that they lack a soul, it's that they're so far primordial dark, like primal dark stuff, that they don't know any other way to crawl out except through the dark. And some of these folks are going to be crawling through that dark period, that dark night of the soul, for longer than I care to even ask the question. And I definitely can't hold somebody's hand through their dark night of the soul. That's not how that works. And so people that come from dark are going to need to evolve up out of that dark. Others that are coming from different starting points of awareness, it's not a matter of better or worse. It's a matter of we're going to experience it very differently. The wealthy people of the past, you know, the oligarchs and the people of the past who've been that power structure, they're being reorganized. And so they're going to have to rethink a few things too. And during all of this shakeup is a time when they're going to have to crawl through their dark night, whatever that looks like. And their dark night means, you know, very different things to somebody who's been the underside of a foot on a neck. You know, when we've been that person, we already understand fear. We already understand that, oh yes, when I awaken and start, you know, pushing off the bad guy kind of thing, that's a very powerful maneuver. Unfortunately though, when you are the bad guy, who are you pushing off? You have to push off your own ego. You have to push off the, you know, things that like to motor from non-local spots. Those that like to use open vessels that are greedy and hungry and willing to do dastardly deeds, you know? We have to get through that dark night. And that dark night is very different than someone who is here on some other business and they're standing on that. You know, when people stand on business in the dark, it's not a very solid place to stand anymore. It used to be, however, it's not anymore. And boy, is it pissing people off, you know, and it's causing fear. However, the fear is not going to look the same. It's not going to act the same. However, it's all the same separation from source. Whatever told NPCs, soulless people, people that are separated that far from their remembrance of themselves, whatever those things were, we can never be, in my humble opinion, we can never be so far removed from that we are just literally soulless, However, we can definitely be so far down into the fractional percentage of how much we're activating and recognizing and acknowledging and have access to that'll give the appearance of that for darn sure. And we're going to experience this time of our lives here on this planet very differently. And if we're star seeds or light workers, people on a mission, I have a very specific job here. I know what I need to do here. 1010 just passed. When we're in that time, our dark night is not going to look the same. It absolutely will not. The dark night for what you see is happening now, their dark night means they play the battle points of the Hunger Games, pretty raw and real, and District 1 and 2 are after each other now because they've wiped out all the other districts. So now there's infighting, and there's what you would expect to see happen in an apex predator triangle where everybody can't be the apex triangle. Everybody can't be the apex of the triangle. They can't be the predator of the apex triangle if they're not good enough. And now we don't have anybody else because the waking up folks are figuring out how not to be the bait dog. They're figuring out, oh yeah, no, I don't want to do that, thanks anyway, and they're bouncing and moving on. If they're standing there battling, they're still interested in the old game, and that keeps that system going and feeds it. It doesn't matter if it's a challenge or not. However, it does keep up the ethic that, oh yeah, this is the system. Yeah, it does work. We can keep trying this. We can keep pumping and blowing and hoping that we can 1111 revive this thing. Call the code, man. Absolutely call the code, call it early, and don't initiate rescue efforts, in places where, no, not with this, because if we're here for very specific work, we understand, or we're learning, the cruelty of this situation is self-imposed. People can get the help that they need, deserve, want, etc. People can have all the access to, the knowledge. It's a matter of what are you more interested in knowing. Are you more interested in knowing the Matrix over here or the Hunger Games some more? Then that's going to need to be your focus over there, because trying to split your attention between being, up here in the 5D and I'm going to play hard in the Matrix and bounce in, and actually eat the fake steak and ply the pleasures of the red dress lady, that's not how most of us really truly want to experience life whenever we've been outside of the Matrix, and we understand that, I don't have to live in this system of domination and doo-doo. I don't have to live under this. Obviously, I live on the planet. I'm going to be subject to have to live by the rules of those that govern, in places where, okay, I need gas in my car, then I'm going to have to play around here with getting creative. However, being victimized is the one who would stand at the gas station and go, oh no, what do I do? Well, we solve problems. That's what we do. And we move away from getting bitter boots about it, because we're all, coming into this game, this understanding at whatever level we are. However, just because I have compassion and, patience, etc. with people doesn't mean I'm going to give anybody a free pass anymore. There's no such thing. Giving people free passes to continue their bullshit actively is a cruelty at this point, in my humble opinion. Doesn't mean that I, counsel of every single soul that comes into my, area or talks to me or anything like that. I'm not talking about getting into battle points with people. However, I'm very specifically 1313 talking about very ruthless in the cutoff game with folks of, these are my boundaries and this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And people that were in the old system in my world, they didn't respond well, and they got very uptight, very angry, very upset, etc. And so just because I'm loving and kind doesn't mean that I'm going to put up with people laying hands on me or stealing from me or lying to me or, cheating me or something, or doing, all kinds of weird stuff, kitchen witch stuff, wishing me ill. That's not tolerable. And the system, the same way, is to notify them that I'm exiting your life and you are not welcome to be a part of mine. So see you later. It's not happening. This is going to cease and desist now. And that is how I can come into a better understanding, right? By releasing people with kindness, and to let them know, the few select that I speak to, and let them know, this is why I'm exiting your world, because this doesn't work for me. And I have compassion. So if you ever figure it out and get your head, out of the darkness, wherever it's stuffed up into, when you come to that point, you'll know and you'll understand better, and perhaps we can chat then. And until then, we don't really have much we can talk about. And the sad fact is, at this point, We have to be willing to walk away from people permanently, not just, get better, get better and let me know. No, it's walk away, because people being left to their own devices is exactly what this is teaching us, is to learn sovereignty, learn how to think for yourself, learn how to take care of yourself, learn how to meet your own needs on every level that is possible, and when you need to reach out and ask for help, make sure you've done everything to set that up successfully. That if I'm asking for help, on a medical question, for instance, I'm going to research that to the best of my ability and at least have very thoughtful, well-planned questions. If I'm concerned about my health, if I'm, getting into investing, I need to know, something about that. I'm not going to just rely on people anymore to bring me their business and assume that they're standing on business. They might be, however, it might not be the same business that I choose to stand on. And if they're still over there in the game of any kind, that's really not, there's no game in being a balanced individual. There's no game whatsoever involving anyone else. There's only the mastery of self. And that comes with conquering the fear. It comes with facing the fear. There's no need to conquer it. We just need to turn around and face it. People who want to bring the battle, conquer your fear. Just face it is enough, because it's some part in us. Fear is a primal response. However, it's tied to something inside of us does not feel like it can handle this current situation. I either don't have enough information, I don't have the skills, I don't have the, or this didn't go well with this person the last time, and it's likely to. We spin off in all kinds of different directions, and yet if we fully understood, I'm good, I know exactly what I'm about, and I got this. Even though I might be afraid, I can turn around and I can look at this right in the eye and say, I wonder what needs to happen here. What do I think? And I can listen to my body. I can listen to my own intelligence. However, I'm never going to get to any of those places of capability or ability, and I'll never develop them into, a clean strategy if I'm not looking at it to try. If I'm constantly out here figuring who I can screw over, who I can, pinch, who I can poke, who I can blame out here and make it an external process, it's already over in the Hunger Games. The minute that we look outward for any answer before we look inward, we know ourselves very well, then we go out into the world. Same as we would counsel ourselves, educate ourselves about a medical diagnosis that we're gonna wanna talk to the doctor about. Then I educate myself on my realistic questions based on that, and I don't waste time. I go in knowing already something about it. Same thing with here. When we go out into the world and we have no idea what our inventory is, our emo bag is full, way full, and it's dribbling everywhere, and it's getting holes poked in the bottom because, the emo bag like that really isn't a sustainable thing. It can't hold its own right now, and it never will again, because that's not where we are anymore in the human consciousness. People are waking up. They don't want to live in fear. They don't want to live under the thumbnail of somebody else, and they don't want to live knowing or believing on any level whatsoever that they are a slave to any system, much less multiples. And like I said, working within the framework of the matrix, sure, I have to live on this planet just like everybody else. I choose to be here, then I'm going to work that to the best of my ability. And because I understand the need sometimes is to be disciplined, then I'm not going to get my way about everything. This isn't about me getting my way in order to have peace, in order to feel balanced. It's about feeling balanced, period. And that is the way. Not my way. My way may be highly imbalanced. However, the work is still going to fall on me if I'm looking around and throwing shade about how the work is being done. That doesn't look right. Well, that couldn't possibly be. No, there are forces in place here that are absolutely guiding and governing, and we all have our own team of emissaries and light workers and stewards of the light that can help us if we so choose to ask for that assistance. If we choose to go on our own and slide around, then we're on our own, sliding around in dark places, hooking up with dark stuff that we may or may not be able to identify. And that's a treacherous game at this point, and not one that's very winnable, if you will, because there's no holds barred anymore. This is just we're going full Monty, full frontal, let's do it. And so I encourage people to get a hold of what you would consider you and do your questions, start asking in here, so that when you go out into the world, you can interview life and figure out, this doctor doesn't seem very qualified, doesn't seem to know a whole lot of anything about what I'm talking about. I'm going to need to get a third, a fourth, a 10th opinion. I don't need anybody else's opinion one day, ideally, is what that would move into. So anyway, That's long enough. 1919 just passed. Wow. Thank you very much. So that's enough. I hope that this has been helpful for you in some way. And I hope that you enjoy your day no matter what part of the day you're in. And remember to get within your skin because you're divine. It is absolutely fine. Everybody's divine is fine. It's a matter of can you get in line with it and what does it take to get there. And none of that happens by looking outward. It comes by looking inward and doing that careful study and consideration of ourselves. And then beginning to move out into the world, asking questions, doing an interview session sort of with life and saying, how am I understanding this? What am I getting mirrored back to me? What am I experiencing with this that is really feeding me and what is really not feeding me? And where am I willing to put my attention and what am I willing to eat? So anyway, as I said, take care and I'll see you again next time, friends. Bye-bye.